Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBE Daily Chat Group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
Yo, welcome back to the VIBEZ Daily podcast. It is day 150 of our year-long series that we have titled Devoted, as we are journeying through the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I am back again, joined by my wife Victoria and my friend Shameeka, and so grateful to have you guys with us again. We start a new book today, the book of Job. It'll take us through this week and next week to complete this book, but really an exciting story, very unique story in scripture in so many ways. We find it here in the middle, but technically it takes place really a long time ago. Back in the middle of Genesis really is when it's believed that this story actually happens. But yeah, very interesting. Doesn't tell us who wrote it. Doesn't give us a whole lot of clues on when it was written exactly. Doesn't even necessarily involve any Israelites. Right? Which is so interesting, right? Because obviously Abraham hasn't come to this point, right? And so very, very interesting story, but so unique and insightful in a lot of ways. So let's just jump right in. Job, whom the book is named after, is essentially who we're introduced to kind of here in the beginning. And again, this very interesting scene. First, as we're just introduced to how good he is, and then something that happens here in heaven, this kind of meeting or sort that happens in heaven. But before we get to the test, was there anything really in the beginning of chapter 1, as you just kind of are introduced to who Job is, that was interesting to you guys?
I love this first verse where it talks about how he was a blameless and upright man who feared God and shunned evil. Like, to have that kind of reputation, I'm just like, that's amazing. And I think beforehand, I used to kind of look at that word blameless as like he never sinned, but that's not true. Like, we get to continue to see, like, Job stayed in this constant state of repentance continually. He was always going to God on behalf of his own sins, and not just his own sins, but the sins of his family, like his children. And so I think that's where that word blameless comes from, is that, like, if we believe repentance to be what it is today, that means that when we go before God and present these things to him and to turn from them, like, he wipes it clean, as white as snow, as the word says, and it's like as if he had done it no more. And so I think that was one of the things that really stuck out to me, was just seeing that description of him and knowing that like I can have that too if I continue to turn to God.
That's good.
So yeah,
it is really good. And I love how they, from the beginning, because I feel like this is a book of debating, like a back and forth. I love how the first verse kind of just tells us what it is.
That's right.
This is the truth. He is blameless. And he is upright.
That's right.
And he does fear God and turn away from evil. So although there's a whole lot of back and forth that we'll see that happens throughout this book, I feel like the first verse shows us and tells us what we can believe in. Because sometimes you might be like, I don't know, Joe, were you? Maybe you did. But I feel like it just sets the tone for the whole book. This is exactly who we are dealing with. And then I love that when he starts to talk about his wealth and stuff, that it starts with kids, right? It starts with his children being his first blessings here.
That's good.
And then it goes into his possessions, but it's homeboy was wealthy. Just to think this one guy, I mean, we talked about some of the stuff that Abraham had, right? Very similar, and these thousands of flock and thousands of, and so I was just like, wow, he did have a lot and had a lot to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he stewarded it all well too.
Yeah.
Which was great to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so he's an awesome dude. By any stretch of imagination, as you said, he's as we get into what comes next, right? It, like I said, we can tell already it's not due to his actions, right? That this is I mean, technically it is because of his actions, but not because he did something wrong that this happens, right? Yeah. And so I do think that it does. It definitely gives us this like prelude, and let's just go ahead and set the record straight, kind of for what's going to come. But you know, I think as we continue into chapter 1, what is more significant is not just that the author says this about him, but it's also what God says about him.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good.
Because, as, you know, God seems to be like holding this meeting, I don't know, staff meeting, I don't know what it is, right? Like,
with all these angels.
Yeah, with his angels and whatnot, right? We joked about a staff meeting before. I think it was with Jehoshaphat or something before where... or it was one of the kings. I can't remember. Maybe it wasn't Jehoshaphat, but it was some king where he was holding a staff meeting of like, how should I do this? And, you know, they kind of give him some ideas. So he's seeming to be doing one of that, something like that again. And, man, Satan comes up and is just like, you know, this guy, Job, I'm looking for somebody to go after. He's like, well, have you considered Job? You know, because he is blameless, right? Because he is this. And I just, like I said, I love that. I just love that even God sees him and acknowledges that reputation, right? Or that character in him. And I think that to me is even more significant than just the author's context for it. But what else jumps out to you guys? Kind of the second part of 1 here as we set the tone for what's really going to take place for the rest of this book.
Well, I thought it was interesting that just how Satan had access to God, because I think in my mind when I hear about just the fall of him, it's like the idea of like he got kicked out of heaven and like, you know, him and his other little angels followed and now they're demons, and so like there's not this access, if you will. But it does say in my Bible that like when the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, so did Satan come. So I'm just like, he still has some kind of like way of getting to the Lord. But I just love seeing how we get to see that Satan knows exactly who God is. He knows that God is powerful.
Yeah.
He even speaks about like, like you got a hedge of protection over homie, over Job.
I can't even get to him.
Yeah. So he knows like he's contributing all these good things that God is that has power of over Job. And again, I love the book of Job probably for this very reason of like it shows that even Satan had to get permission. To do anything that he wanted to do. Because he is not powerful. He is going around like a roaring lion, but he's not a lion. For real. Like he literally got to go to God to get permission, and seeing that God gave him permission not just to like just annihilate Job. Like he had a plan and a purpose for it, and he was like, I'm gonna let you think everything is all sweet for a little bit and give you some kind of power, but it came with limitations at the end of the day.
That's so
good.
Yeah. And I love this. I love that it even just gives us the insight of Satan, like what he be up to.
Yeah.
He was out here walking, just looking and walking around, like on the earth, just seeing. And he's like, okay, but I just, if only the Lord could say the same about me, right? Have you considered my girl Victoria?
Ooh.
She's upright, you know, and she ain't gonna let me down. Like it's like the Lord knew and had that foresight of like,
she getting
do
somewhere.
what you want to do with Job, because I already know my Job. He's not gonna deny me. He's not gonna start cursing me. Like the Lord would have never put Job up to this test if he thought that he was gonna fail and that Satan was going to be right about anything. And so I was just like, that's a big challenge. Like, how many times can the Lord stand up and say, I put my trust in Victoria to not do me wrong, right?
But not only that, what about the times that he probably has done that, but I'm like, God, don't let those things happen to me. Or like, please avoid any hurt, harm, or danger, or this and this and that. You get what I'm saying? Like, so that's what kind of stuck up to me, is that I'll be quick to pray all that stuff away.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be quick to be like, yeah, don't even consider me. Like, don't even bring none of that on me.
Nope.
But
I want the hedge.
Yeah,
I want the hedge and
give
only the
me
hedge
all the protection and safety. Yes.
But not knowing, like you said, that even the testing is what will give the Lord glory and give you victory over Satan.
Ooh.
Come
on.
Yeah. No, that's so good, because I think that was definitely, and I think you took it right from me, that like what struck me was just his confidence in Job. And like I really did come away like, is God that confident in me? Like, does he have that same confidence in me that like even if he took everything away from me, that I would still bless him, right? Like and yeah, it's like, it's to your point, Shameeka, it's such a hard thing to like wrestle with, because like I want to desire, or I desire the heart that that Job has for God.
Yeah.
I do not desire how he had to prove it.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like I hope I never have to prove it in that same manner.
Seriously.
Like, for real. You know what I mean? But like at the same time, like I hope that if I were ever put in that position, that I would prove it. Right. Yeah. Like, and so it's like, it's so hard to kind of, because in a lot of ways, I mean, to your point, it's with a test, like that's the whole point of a test.
Yeah.
The whole point of a test is to prove that you know the information, right? Like, to prove that you understand it, to prove that like, all right, you've been in this class for the last, you know what I'm saying, who knows how many months here. You've been doing all the homework. I've been teaching. Prove it. Yeah. Prove that you understand what I taught you. And like, yeah, like that's the piece that I'm like, man, God, I don't want to. I don't want to have to prove it. Yeah. But I do pray that if I'm ever put in that position, that you would have the same confidence in me. And yeah, like out the gate, I'm just kind of like, geez, like that's heavy. And it is challenging, because he said, I hope that he would just say like, yeah, have you considered Eric for those reasons? Now, again, Lord, you can keep the hedge.
Come on.
And he can just say, oh yeah, I considered him, but you know, he ain't gonna, I already know he not gonna. That's what I want. I want the enemy to also know, like, I ain't gonna do it too, so that he don't even try.
That's that part.
So he don't even try. He be like, I already know, Eric, love you, man. Like, even if you take all that stuff, he gonna love you.
Which, as you were speaking, like the scripture that came up, I believe it's in James. It talks about like, consider it pure joy whenever you encounter, you know, many trials because of what it produces. It produces like, you know, endurance and our, you know, faith and all that stuff. But it's like, I look at that scripture all the time. I'd be like, but I don't want to.
Exactly.
But I don't want to go through the trials, and I don't want to. But again, like taking this scripture for what it is, and like looking at Job's life, it does challenge me to, you know, allow for those testings to come about, and for it to be a moment for me to prove my allegiance to the Lord.
Yeah, allegiance to the Lord and not the stuff. I think we talked about this when we were back in Abraham, right? Where it was like this giving up of his son Isaac was this real test of like, do you love God or do you love what the God has been doing for you? And that was the point of Satan. Oh, you've been doing a lot for him, so of course he likes you.
Yeah,
exactly.
Take away the stuff and take away the toys and all the things that you've been giving him, and he's gonna hate you. Yeah. And so for me, I looked at this and was just like, I cannot imagine losing all my kids, losing all my money, like losing all even attempts to gain more money, right? Like everything's gone, right? Like, and then eventually in the next chapter, like to lose my health too. Like, I can imagine losing all of that. But then Job is like, okay, well listen, naked I came, naked I'll go. I didn't come with nothing. I could leave with nothing. But great is the Lord. Like,
and the Lord gave it to me.
The Lord
so he has
a
right to take it away.
He has a right to take this back. And to me, that is rough. And I mean, I'm even just thinking about little things that we don't want the Lord to take from. Don't take my career. I like my position.
Yeah.
Like, don't take this friend. We cool. Like, don't take that guy or that relationship or whatever. I want to hold on to it. Like, these are the little things that we be trying to hold on to. And, like, God is just, like, even just showing us here with Job, like, Job got everything taken from him.
Yeah.
But yet, he was just like,
Yeah.
This might be getting ahead a little bit, but like the fact that this is like a hit on his reputation, if you will, because a lot of people look at those things as like, okay, you're in right standing with God,
absolutely,
and you will see his friends talk later. Like it was like there was this correlation between like if you didn't have those things or those things was taken away from you, that meant you were in wrongdoing with God. That meant you've done something that was granted this like consequence or punishment, and so. Yeah, I just think that's wild. Yeah.
That's it's the big idea of this book, right? Yeah. Like, is what does God's justice look like?
Yeah.
Like, what is justice? Is justice that good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people, right? Or is it deeper than that? And is it bigger than that? And I think that's a lot of what we'll explore over these next few days as we go through this book, because I think we will come to understand it's more complicated than that, right? But yeah, I think all of what you guys have said is so good, and you know, just that is kind of the thing that I am so struck by is like, I think we turn away from God for so much less. Like when I just think about and I've been saying maybe just us here on the couch, but I just think about the faith. Like, you know, we're in a culture and a time where like people deconstruct their faith every day, right? And you know, oftentimes the trigger to that is something like not going your way, right? Like I was watching a clip, somebody responded, I think Miles Minnick was responding to some clip of Kanye, like kind of, I guess he said something about walking away because he like prayed to the Lord and he didn't answer his prayers, kind of thing, whatever, right? And I said, I just kind of saw Miles' response to it, but like that kind of thing, like that's every day what people are doing. Like, I prayed, asked the good Lord for something, he didn't give it to me, you know? And I think it's so crazy because like you said, I don't know anybody that's ever experienced this kind of loss, particularly this quickly, right? Like this all happened in a day.
One after the other, like literally boom, 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 boom,
in the same day. You know what I'm saying, right? Like, and information didn't even travel that fast back then. So I don't know how all this stuff was happening. You know what I mean? Like that day that he finds out all this stuff, and then even the second round, as we'll get to in chapter 2, like this is all within, you know, almost immediate that he's dealing with all this. And I'm like, like we'll walk away because, like you said, we didn't get the career we wanted, or because we ain't married yet and we 35, and like where my husband at, Lord? Like I'm walking away. I'm gonna go do what I want to do now, right? True. Like those kind of things are enough. Yeah. Let's be like, oh, ain't no God, or I'm walking away, and I'm like, man, this is crazy that he said go through all of this and come away like, God, you gave it to me, you can take it away, and to just like, as verse 22 says, throughout all of this, that he just does not sin or blame God for anything.
Yes. Underlined, highlighted, like in all of that. Still didn't sin against him. Man, oh man. Come on, Joe.
But then in chapter 2, if I don't mind, like when he says, and then just another day, there was another day. I'm like, how long has time passed? Because it doesn't even tell us like how long he has to sit and grieve and deal with this, right? Like, and just for time to pass, and then yet another thing happens where once again it is nothing about his response or what he has done even in the first chapter that has prompted this in the second chapter, right? Like in terms of his wrongdoing, right? He didn't do anything wrong to receive any more punishment. He actually did right. And that's the mind-boggling thing for him.
For sure.
It's like, I did right, and now there's even more coming against me. And so, like, here we see Satan again saying, like, he can't even fess up that he's wrong, or that he can't even acknowledge that, like, oh,
that didn't work.
That didn't work. Like you said, it wasn't going to work, God. Like, he can't even, his pride, he just can't even he like, no, 2 for 2. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
all or nothing. So like he's over
He
here.
said double down.
Yeah.
Double or nothing. Here
Double
we
or
go.
nothing.
Double or nothing.
And so like I'm just like he's now just trying to do the next thing. What else can I do? Okay,
Yeah.
we'll strike his flesh, and then he will, and so I do feel like it's just I couldn't imagine, like you said, even after losing all of that, and still blessing the Lord. And still something else happening.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking. And I feel like we see his heartbreak here.
Yeah.
Like I see that, like, although he is not blaming God, I see this confusion.
Yeah.
I could probably feel like, well, why? I didn't do anything in the first place. I didn't do anything in the second place.
Yeah.
In the second place.
Yeah.
Good. I was gonna say, man, like, what really stuck out to me was his wife, Job's wife, in this chapter, where for her, like, all of this is justifiable for her to curse God. And the fact that that was her advice. In verse 9, it says, you know, his wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die."
Yeah.
I don't understand why that was her response of, like, curse God. The curse God part was the part where I'm just like, okay, maybe if you would have just been like, die, which, why would you say that anyway? That's your husband. But she's wanting him to do the very thing that Satan wanted. And to hear how, like, that was her response, it brought me back to Eve a little bit, like in the garden, where it's like the influence of these women are major. And I'm glad that he, you know, stood firm in what he believed. And his response was, shall we accept good from God and not trouble? Like, that just was very wise of him. But he even called his own wife foolish. Like, no, like, this is not what we do. That's not how we're gonna conduct ourselves. But yeah,
that's the big question to me, is that verse 10, right? Like, I think it is just a question for us all to reflect on. Like, should we only accept the good that comes from God and not the adversity, right? And like, or the trouble, I think is what your version says. But yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I had to offer some sympathy. I mean, those are also her kids, right?
that's true.
That died, right? There's also her home, like that, like she lost as much as Job lost in all of this, right? Aside from the probably the health issues that he's dealing with, like, she lost as much as he did. And I think, honestly, she is how I would have responded. Like, I want to think I would act like Job.
Yeah.
But I think it's also fair to say it's possible I would have acted like her. You know, just being candid in, like, my humanity and my you know, sinful nature, that, like, it's very possible that any of us could have been his wife, right? And the way that she responded, because she lost as much as he did too. Like, it wasn't like this just happened to him. And so, like, I felt some sympathy again, despite the fact that, you know, again, it's the wrong way to approach it. I did feel like I can understand why she would be as frustrated and irritated as well. But yeah, I think that question, man, is just the one to think about, because I think we have to. Like, if we're going to trust God, we have to accept both his good and the adversity, and believe it all comes from him, you know, in that regard.
And not expect him to just be this genie that is going to give us what we want.
Yeah.
And, like, everything just be rainbows and Skittles and just, like, like, nothing bad. So,
yeah, and that's hard, because sometimes that's the picture of what we think living for God is. Is like, if I walk with God, God's going to put the hedge of protection around me. He's going to keep me. Yeah. And he's going to bless me. Yeah. But like you said, sometimes it's promised. Like, Jesus even promised us that that's not going to be the case. Right. But like you said, I would hope I would be the Job type. But, like, I think there's a reason why the Lord said, have you considered my servant Job, and not have you considered my servant Job and his wife? Because, like, she wasn't, she didn't have the heart, you know, right?
That's good.
And so, like, I think he was really specific because there was probably only one person.
Yeah, don't consider the whole family now.
And I don't want to even think, it's that prideful of myself to even think that, like, I would respond like him. I probably wouldn't, because I'd be throwing fits over little stuff. So, so I just think, I think it's really interesting, though, that is his response. But then, like, you know, then his friends come and they don't even recognize him. And it's probably what the wife was like, I don't even recognize you, right? You're not even speaking like the husband I know. But I do appreciate that they just sat for 7 days and said nothing. Like 7 days and 7 days. Like, sometimes you do just need to sit and just feel and, like, empathize and see, like, what's going on. Sometimes we be rushing in, laying hands, praying. It's okay. The Lord gonna bless you. He gonna bring you out. You know, we gonna do all this stuff, right? And sometimes
That's real.
You just need to go and sit, you know, and, like, be silent and, like, you know, because sometimes we just don't need Mr. Fix-It, you know?
Which the silence was what actually needed to be happening throughout this
entire
whole book.
I just wish they would have stayed silent.
Yes, they should have kept it
for a few more chapters.
And
even just let Job lament.
Yeah.
Well, they don't. And so we get into chapter 3, which starts a series. So from here, pretty much until like 38-ish or so of Job, which we'll get into next week. We won't finish that this week, but there's just kind of this back and forth between he and his friends. And, you know, as much as, I do think the silence would have been helpful, I also think that this wrestling with this was helpful too, right? For all of them, just the trying to understand and articulate what they felt was happening. But in the midst of that, they throw out some accusations. It's not really helpful. But it starts with chapter 3 with Job really just kind of opening up with how he just feels, right? Cursing the day that he's born, and just kind of like saying he just wish he never lived, and, you know, kind of going through a bunch of things here. What jumped out to you in Job's opening lament, as he just kind of laments things? What jumped out to you here in 3?
I can relate. Like, I feel like my response definitely would have been like, all these train of thoughts that he's gone to, like, is basically it's better to die than to live. And, like, wait, why was I even born in the first place? Like, I feel like that's where I would be. And I think that's why I had a little bit of beef with Joe's wife about cursing God, because I'm like, God, I know you are good. Yeah. Outside of everything else, I know you're good. But I am going to say something else about the other situations and the other things and, like, all this stuff. So, that's something that stuck out to me.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that instead of cursing God, the first thing that he comes out of his mouth is a curse against his own self, kind of like his own birth, like his own creation,
existence, all that. Yeah.
Right? So not curse God, but like, God, why did you make me though? But what really hit me, and I know this is all the way at the end of this chapter, but verse 25, it says, "For the thing that I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me." And I can just only imagine, like, he did all these things, like you mentioned before. Like, he did all these things to prevent the wrath of God coming against him and his kids and his family, right? Like, this was what he was fearful of. Yeah. He's like, I did all these things, and the very thing that I was fearing has happened. Yeah. And it's just like, what?
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I appreciate his lament, though, because it just reminds me a lot of David. And this is why I love, like, the Psalms, which I'm excited that we'll be getting to soon, is that, like, I feel like it's just the realness or rawness of our heart. Yeah. And, like, God allows us to be human and, like, to, you know, go to him about these things and to, like, you know, lament to him about these things.
Exactly.
And there's a way that you can do it without sinning.
Yeah.
And so I think Job definitely is showing us this in these chapters. It's like, I can be real with God, lament to him, talk to him, even my deepest thoughts, even if it's ugly. Yeah. Like, to the point of, like, I don't even know why you created me kind of thing. but yet I'm still not sinning against him.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's good.
That's so good.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good like thing to point out that, like you mentioned in Psalms, Job does begin a genre in the Bible of poetry, right? So that's why Job is placed where it is, right? So even though historically or chronologically it should be much further back, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, these next few books are all books of poetry or books of wisdom is what, you know, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes are. And so that is why it's here, because a majority of this book is going to be poetry, right? Or at least viewed as that as far as the genre. So yeah, it is good. I mean, like you said, I love it. It's honest. It is real. It is raw. He is not holding back whatsoever with how he feels. And so, yeah, there are some verses here that just kind of, you know, jump out, or different lines that jump out that I think were extremely interesting. But yeah, the biggest thing is definitely, like, I don't know. To me, what I was just struck by is that he is so burdened that, like you said, he wished he never lived. And to me, it feels like he lived a good life up to this point. Yeah. And so it's so crazy to me. I mean, it's crazy because I mean I can understand, but it's so crazy to me that it's like, I wish I even never experienced that.
The good.
Right? It's so bad now.
Ooh, yeah.
That, like, I wish I never even experienced the good.
The good. Yeah. That's
like,
real.
I just would rather have never had and lost, right? Than to, you know, whatever. It's just, it's like, I don't even want that. And it's interesting because, again, you could say, like, well, I lived a good life for most of my life. Yeah. Had riches, had children, had those things. Let me just focus on that. Like, we probably would have understood it if Job was just like, yeah, this stinks. Like, I don't really like this version of my life, but I lived a pretty good life, you know? But it's like, nah, man, this is so bad. I don't even want that. Like, I wouldn't even, that's not even good enough for me to face. And so I think that was the thing that just stuck out to me, is like, there's no reference to, like, anything that happened before this. Like, there's no reference to, like, my life was great, why did you take all this from me? It's just like, I just wish I never lived and never existed and never experienced any of this. But chapter 4, so that's his opening monologue, right? So that's how he starts. You know, after the silence, he begins to speak, and he just kind of says this, and it appears aloud because people respond, right? So it's not like this internal prayer to the Lord silently. Like, he says this aloud. And his first friend, Is it Eliphaz? Eliphaz, that's probably a better way to say that. Speaks up. Eliphaz speaks up. And yeah, man, as you said, it starts a series of accusations that comes from him. And he really takes these next two chapters, 4 and 5. What stands out to you about what he says in his response to Job?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that, like, though they sat with him, and I thought they were, like, empathizing, the moment he speaks, they just turn. Oh, like, for sure. You know, like, I would have wished that, like, the beginning of his words was like, yo, man, I get it. Like, this is a lot. Like, I actually don't get it because I actually haven't experienced this, right? And this is a lot. But, like, from the gate, it's like, okay, yeah, you used to be somebody. Like, this is my You instructed many. You strengthened the weak hands. Like, you used to be somebody. But now stuff's come upon you and you're impatient. It touches you and you're dismayed. And, you know, like, where's your, you know, do you not fear God? Where's your integrity? Like, and pretty much, like, where have you ever seen somebody who's been upright or whatever and cut off? You know, like, this must be something that you've done. Yeah. And to me, because it came so quickly, in my mind, I wondered, did they really ever think that he was the person that he really was? Like, do they even really think that he was as upright or as blameless? Were they, you know, were they like, Job gotta be doing something. Right. Now we see it. Like, oh, now you exposed. Yeah. And so that's what it feels like to me.
No, for real.
Right?
I thought of that for sure. It was like they were looking for that, like, speckle, like that little,
the whole time,
that little thing. But also too, it's like when you pointed out the whole, like, them sitting there for 7 days with him in silence, that's enough for your mind to go wild and be like, think of all the list of possibilities of like why this could be happening. Yeah. And it seemed like that could have been one of the things that they landed on being the one that made most sense to them. Yeah. Like, because again, it's human minds. Like, we're, our thoughts is whatever. But like, that probably was the thing that was like, okay. Because as human, I can relate to this, that we need something that like makes sense. Rational. Like there needs to be like a black and white, like, okay, you did this and now this is the consequences that happen as a result of it. So maybe that's just where they landed on, was like, well, this makes sense. Yeah. You did something.
Yeah. I think a couple things that just stuck out to me. Verse 8, my version reads, in my experience, those who plow injustice and those who sow trouble reap the same. And I feel like the troublesome were those first three, that in my experience.
In my experience, yeah.
Right? Like, that the whole thing that they're seeing is from their perspective and understanding.
For sure.
Limited understanding, right? And that like, and again, I think it's very much, how this plays out to me again is just so much like how we tend to handle conflict, even like in our relationships with one another, right? That it's just like, here we are having this conversation, someone's lamenting, they going through stuff, and we try to tell them about our life. You know what I'm saying? Like,
come on.
Well, one time I did, such and such, or, the Lord, and like, it's like, man, it's not about you right now, man. It's about your experience. It's not about your experience. Like, this is happening to me. And like, but again, just even that limited perspective of like, just because that's what you know or that's what you've experienced doesn't mean that is what is happening. And I think that leads so much of like what he comes to. But then the other thing that I thought was just verse 12, that it made it like a word was brought to me in secret. Like, to me, it almost feels like he's also trying to say that like God whispered something to him to say like, this is what's happening, right?
For sure.
Like, I got a word from the Lord.
Exactly.
that this is what's happening. And it's like, there's obviously not, because we know that, right? We have the background.
Exactly.
So we know exactly what's happening.
So your discernment's off, sir.
It is. In my verse, it says in verse 15, it says, a spirit glided past my face and the hair on my body stood on end. And so it is like this idea that like, there was this message from God, and I immediately wrote down, I was like, well, obviously a demon visited you.
That's what I said.
Because it definitely wasn't the spirit of the Lord or none of his angels. So this was definitely that was the wrong spirit.
That was the wrong spirit.
And I was also thinking about like, this is why the Lord says to test every spirit.
So you're right about that.
Because you automatically assume that it had to have been the Lord, because it justified or fit what you was already believing.
It did, and that is even in this, like, you want me to let you go? You be killing me.
But how many times we do that, Eric?
That's exactly what we do.
We want something to confirm what we believe.
Absolutely. Yes. We already had an idea. We already had what we wanted. I just need a sign, not a sign. I need the sign that confirms what I already wanted, right? Like, ooh, Lord, that must have been it. That was the Lord speaking, just because it is confirmed. And you're right, like you said, he already had predetermined in his mind what was going on, and so all he needed was one vision that confirmed that. And it's like, I don't even need to test that. I don't even have to second guess, because that must have been, because it was already what I believe.
And then in verse 16, it's like, then I heard the voice, can mortal man be in the right before God? Can a man be pure before his maker? Like you said, this voice, in my opinion, was a demonic voice, right? Like, it even just shows me that they probably didn't even have, because like you said, from that word of saying, in my experience, right? Like, from my point of view, they probably haven't even really understood that there was two things at play. That there was a God and a Satan happening, right? True. Like, there were like angels and demons happening. Because like, their focus is on what God is doing. He's gonna bless you, like, there probably wasn't even this like understanding of oh, this is a different type of spirit.
Yeah.
Right, that needed to be tested. Like, thinking that all things just came from God and everything was in God's will, everything was God, what God, I mean, it is, right? God permits everything to happen, but just thinking that like, it's all what God has desired, like, he probably, like, limited information, which is why I feel like God is not pleased with them in the end, right? Just to spoiler alert, but, like, you know.
Yeah. Good. Anything else kind of in 4 or 5? We're going to hear from him again, but
we are.
But I'm just curious if there's anything else that he accuses or says that you guys thought was interesting.
I do like there are certain nuggets and certain things that are said that are true.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree
And
with
so
you.
I can just appreciate that, is that like we get to have these glimpses of who God is through the different truths that are sprinkled in these different things that they said. But I do love in verse 8 and 9 how he tells him to appeal, bring his case to God, basically. Is that Habakkuk, or there is something in the Bible that like that's biblical, where we can go and present things to God? We can bring his word back to him and say different things. So I think that there was little wisdoms in the different things that they said.
Yeah, like they understood that, Job, if you did sin, God will forgive you.
Yeah.
Right? Just ask him for forgiveness. All right. And so like in a lot of ways, and that's why, like, again, it's easy because we have the context, right? This is the one thing that none of them have. Nope. We got the prelude.
Yeah.
We know that this was a test from the Lord, that he allowed this to happen. They don't have any of that. Yeah. I can very well understand being in Eliphaz's position, dealing with somebody who's going through stuff, and I'm going through things and I'm trying to think, like, in my knowledge and understanding what I do understand about God, like I'm gonna share what I got. Like, I'm gonna give you what I got. And his heart seems to be in the right place. Like, if you have sinned, ask for forgiveness. God will forgive you. Like, he will. Just ask him. What we'll find out, and we'll get it to tomorrow, is that, like, ultimately the big issue is that Job is like, I know I didn't do nothing wrong. So like, that's what kind of leads all the back and forth. But ultimately, like, you're right. It doesn't seem like he's coming from this condemning, judgmental place of like, I have known all along that you was doing this stuff. It feels like it's more, okay, I only know what I know about God is he blesses those that love him and that live for him, and those that don't are cursed, right? But I also know that he'll forgive you, right?
That's verse 17 and 18 right there.
I know he will. He's happy to, right? And so, like, if you just ask for forgiveness, he'll forgive you. And that's what I got. That's what I know what happens, and maybe that'll work. Try that. Like, that's what it seemed like to me. Like, try that. Right. Try to do that, and ultimately say, we'll just see. Like, Job's just like, I'm not trying that because I ain't do nothing wrong.
Because I'm standing firm on like what I know.
What am I going to ask for? I don't even know where to begin. I think that's where we get next. I want to dive into tomorrow. It's kind of like, what do I ask for forgiveness for? I don't even know where to begin. But we'll get there.
But the way that this ends, though, in verse 27, here he goes. Eliphaz talk about, we have examined this and it is true. So hear it and apply it to your life. Taking it as Bible. Like, this is the truth. The Spirit already told me. We done concluded as your friends that this is, like, they prophesying over him, being prophets. So take it and apply it. Just do it. No, it ain't truth, though.
That's good. But we'll hear Job's reply tomorrow, because he hears it, he listens to everything they say, but does not exactly agree. We'll come to find out and see some of what he responds. But I'm excited to kind of hear this back and forth. I think we will learn a lot about God in this. We'll learn a lot about how to handle, grief and adversity and a lot of different things as they kind of go back and forth. So, appreciate you guys, your thoughts. Thank you guys for joining us. Again, hope this is helpful to you as we continue to go through the book of Job. But until then, we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.